Hello everyone, this is Miguel, the Movie Encyclopedia. In this review, I'll be discussing Denis Villeneuve's newest project, Dune, starring Timothee Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, and Jason Momoa. Based on the classic sci-fi fantasy political novel by Frank Herbert, the film follows House Atreides, a noble house in the Galactic Empire who's been entrusted with the stewardship of planet Arrakis, the only planet that produces the most valuable export in the known universe, a drug known as the Spice. House Atreides faces opposition from their most ancient enemy, House Harkonnen, as the youngest Atreides, Paul, played by Timothée Chalamet, realizes his destiny to affect and change the entire course of the planet Arrakis. As someone who's read Frank Herbert's seminal novel and deeply disliked the first half of the book, I found myself pleasantly surprised by how much I liked Villeneuve's Dune Part 1. It reminds me of a more polished and stunning version of David Lynch's adaptation, which I also enjoyed more than the first half of the book. Villeneuve focuses Part 1 on making the story as easy as possible for newcomers of the franchise to understand and become enveloped in this world by following the two most important storylines of the first half of the book, and cutting out all the boring and unnecessary details of the side characters. Yes, it does make this adaptation less detailed than the book, but it allows Dune to become much more exciting, action-packed, and intoxicating thanks to its gorgeous visuals and great actors. The reason I hate the first half of Frank Herbert's Dune is because it is the slowest and most boring part of the book. The focus feels so scattered as Herbert shifts perspective to so many side characters and goes into excruciating details on their backstories, their histories with the Harkonnens and the Atreides, and their personalities. It's boring as absolute shit. The second half of the book is much more focused as it returns the story back to Paul and his close allies retaking Arrakis from the Harkonnens and saving the Fremen people. It's also much more high stakes and action packed. I was extremely satisfied to find that Dune Part 1 story is more like the second half of the book, focused on the main story of Paul realizing his destiny and the fate of House Atreides and how that affects the people of Arrakis. It's also much more intense and action-packed than I was expecting. This film doesn't have as much action as the second act of the book, but it's definitely more than the first act of the novel. All of these changes makes the story so much easier to understand and follow for newcomers to Dune, even as it goes to some heavy sci-fi world building. Trust me, a lot of the complexities of Dune is still in this movie. What wasn't surprising was how breathtaking the visual effects and cinematography was from beginning to end. Villeneuve is an expert of filling drama-heavy blockbusters with some of the best CGI and practical effects in the film industry, and Dune might just be his master stroke. I have never seen a Villeneuve movie with this much CGI and action, and everything, and I mean every single piece of visual effects looks so grounded and realistic, both CGI and practical effects. It was absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, no one can blend CGI, practical effects, and real locations better than Denis Villeneuve. And I'm so glad that Villeneuve went the extra mile to make this film a different cinematic experience from his previous films. And if he plans on making the second half of Dune even more exciting than this film, I cannot wait to experience it. Another aspect of Dune that wasn't a shock was the strength of its performances. Timothée Chalamet, Oscar Isaac, Josh Brolin, and Jason Momoa were great throughout. We didn't get to see that much of Stellan Skarsgård, Zendaya, or Javier Bardem, but whenever they were on screen, they performed very strong as their respective characters. Stellan Skarsgård was especially haunting as the disturbing and just borderline creepy Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, the main villain of Dune. I hope we get to see some more of him in part 2 because I think this might be Skarsgård's best performance in years. The one actor who kind of felt lifeless in this film was sadly Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica. The character doesn't really have much to do in this movie, and it really shows in her character. I mean, it's very similar to what her character does in part 1, but that just really has to do with Villeneuve adapting Herbert's novel. In the first half, Herbert didn't give much for Jessica to do outside of follow a couple of orders. So I'm not surprised that the same was for Dune Part 1. Ferguson did the best she could, but it just wasn't enough because of how little the story used her. Hopefully Part 2 will use her much more. My one complaint against this movie is that it definitely felt too long. By the last 45 minutes of the movie, I felt like this movie was going on too long. There were a few scenes towards the end that I personally felt like the movie could have cut out, like most of the scenes of Lady Jessica and Paul wandering the desert, which really felt like it took about 20 to 30 minutes of this movie, not to mention all the scenes of them getting rescued and them getting attacked by the Harkonnens during the last 45 minutes of the movie. It really felt like those scenes set after the attack on the capital city could have easily been cut out, and they just could have gone to the scenes where they meet up with the Fremen at the end of the film. The writers could have easily cut out those scenes and reworked the movie so that it could have reached the same conclusion naturally, and make the movie almost a half hour shorter. Aside from that, Denis Villenueve's Dune completely surpassed all of my expectations and provided 21 with its greatest sci-fi epic. It's easy to follow, complex enough to intrigue new and old fans, and one of the most visually stunning and badass movies of the year. If this is what Villeneuve can do with the boring part of Frank Herbert's Dune, I can't wait to see what he does with the great part 2. I'm going to give Dune Part 1 an 8 out of 10 stars. This was truly a great 2021 movie. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you all for watching. If you like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel, comment what you thought of this video, and make sure to share with friends and follow. Make sure to follow Miguel the Movie Encyclopedia on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to get updates on new episodes and geek culture news. Speaking of which, if you want to hear me talk about geek culture, including movies, TV shows, and video games, check out the Movie Encyclopedia podcast. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast episodes. I also want to make a note that this will be my last video, my last YouTube review for a while. A lot of personal changes are happening in my life right now, so I won't be posting any new videos for a couple of months. I just want to thank all the repeat watchers of my channel for following my YouTube reviews for the last 2 to 3 years, and I hope to get back to making new videos sometime in 2022. I hope to have an update sometime then, but as of now I'm going to go dark. I'll be posting one more podcast episode on my Movie Encyclopedia podcast, but after that, that will be it for the next couple of months. So until I hopefully see you again, thank you, and see you later.